War is hell, and we found that out when we got there. After a fight, it was sad to see the dead and wounded taken away. We had developed special relationships with some of them. Our first month of combat was over, and I had seen enough death and destruction to last me a lifetime, but I knew more was ahead. We all wondered how long we could survive. We had lost a lot of men in those 30 days, and we knew the odds would stack up against us the longer we were exposed to such a dangerous environment. I saw so many dead young Americans in the mud of France, in the snow of Belgium, in the forests of Germany. Grew up in northern Wisconsin, had a great life for 18 years before I left for the Army. All summer long, we stayed at the cottages, at the lakes, go swimming and fishing every day. It was just idyllic. It was a great life, a lot to be thankful for. Government was offering these engineering programs, and if you joined and went into this program, it would not only prepare you to join the Army, but then continue education after that. But all of a sudden, there was a tremendous battle called the Kasserine Pass. It was so tragic. We lost so many people there that the War Department said we need more bodies. So they canceled our engineering program, threw all of us into the infantries. Grab a rifle and get out there. When we were in training down in Georgia and in South Carolina, many of the guys, and probably including me, were anxious to get over to Europe and get into the war, to get face to face with the enemy. Let's get over there. It was going to be an adventure.
In 1939 through 41, the Axis was kind of triumphant everywhere. They were winning everywhere and they were pushing everybody around. We regained the initiative in 43, and all of that was because the Allies had accumulated the wherewithal to sustain these massive offensives. This was the time that our divisions that we raised in the aftermath of Pearl Harbor came into play. And so if you take a look at the 90 divisions we fought World War II with, this huge slug of American fighting capability became available. Moran and his 87th Division included 1944 was kind of the year that, from a physical capability point of view, we reached a peak.
The first day I was in action, early December of 1944, we were in the Sarre Valley of France, and we got orders to get out of our foxhole at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning and start advancing, go in that direction. That's where the Germans are. So we got out of our foxholes and started to advance. Within 15 seconds, 7 of our guys were down, or dead or wounded. 15 seconds was all it took to see these bodies falling. The machine guns roaring, the 88s exploding around us. It showed us this was a serious, deadly business, and we better pay attention and cover our butts as much as we could. But there's a limit to what you can do to avoid disaster when it's all around you. There's no way in the world you can be prepared for that. We kept advancing, and the Germans with the 88, the 88 was the most deadly piece of field artillery in the world at that time. If you heard the scream, you're in good shape because the shell was traveling so much faster than the speed of sound. But they just kept picking us off as we advanced. One shell would get 2 guys. I was standing in the field down the Sarre Valley with 51 dead American boys around me, all dead, all bodies all ripped up, guts strung out on their bodies. Several days later, I lost my 4 best friends. You know, when you're in a group, like in a platoon, you have certain guys that are your best friends. And I lost all of them within an hour. It was just a brutal introduction to war.
Moran's division was committed first in the vicinity of Metz to the Rhineland campaign, and that was this long, grinding effort to try to break through the German West Wall defenses. After the liberation of France, that went quickly. I mean, we overran France as a whole. The German army took over 200,000 casualties, but probably more important than that, it lost over 200,000 as prisoners of war to us. We were kind of exhausted by the time we reached the German border. Well, the Germans were aware of this, and they knew we had a major thrust in the south and a major thrust in the north, but in between them was this Ardennes region, which was inhospitable, heavily forested, a lot of rivers. No one thought an offensive would come through there. But the Germans gathered a great mass of armor. This was their last clear chance to win the war.
We were in combat just about a month before we got into the bulge. We got orders to attack a road junction about 2 miles away. We hadn't been in the woods more than about 2 hours, and we heard some explosions, some guns firing. We knew there were Germans on both sides of us and in front of us. We now knew there were Germans in back of us, so we were surrounded. 0-degree weather. We couldn't go anywhere. We just stayed there in our foxhole day after day after day. We had no blankets, we had no bedrolls, nothing but the clothes on our back, and we were freezing to death. Some of the guys had trench foot. It was terrible. You lay down on the bottom of the foxhole, you could hear shells going over, you could hear machine guns. You couldn't get rest. You had no food for several days. The kid in the foxhole next to me had a bullet hole right between his eyes. We just pulled his helmet down over his face. As long as we're in the battlefields, we know that there's a chance we're going to get killed. We knew that. Several people were killed by these mortars coming in. It was very scary to hear that ping, and you know that something's up in the air, is heading your direction. Nothing you can do to stop it. We were pinned down for 6 days. The overcast was so low that the Air Force could not operate. So we were strictly ground troops against ground troops. We said a lot of prayers, I did. Germans had many more casualties than we did. And they were suffering from the cold too. About the 4th day, the fog started to lift and the Air Force started to come in and do some strafing. Big help in getting us out of there. The bulge collapsed after about the 6th day, and we were able to walk out of there. 70 of us went in there. I bet 55 probably walked out on their own 2 feet. The people in the back heard so much noise from all the shells landing and the machine guns going on. And when the noise stopped after about the 3rd or 4th day, they figured, well, they're all dead. And we were going to ship our personal possessions back home. Yeah, they thought we were all gone, yeah. Thank God we weren't.
It depends on which Germans you talk to when it was they felt the war could no longer be won. And there's some in professional capacities who thought that 1943 was the time to just cash in your chips and make peace, and But 1944, particularly in the aftermath of the Battle of the Bulge, I think it was pretty clear to everybody that they weren't going to win unless there was some kind of falling out between the Russians and the Western Allies. Nevertheless, Hitler convinced them that there were miracle weapons on the way, convinced them that the Allies were fragile and were going to fall apart. He kept them committed to grinding battles that lasted all the way through May, and the German army fought on almost till the end. And so that was just that much more of a chore for Moran and his fellow soldiers, because they had to fight their way through all of this stiff resistance, even though the war was effectively won.
Then we went to the Rhine River, moving from one battlefield to the next. We just kept going. Crossing the Rhine River, we lost so many men in the water. The river was red from the blood. We didn't know the Germans were dug in around the base of that hill. There were 5 heavy machine guns firing at us. So we got out in the middle of the river, machine guns blazing away. I could feel bullets hitting my paddle. They're screaming as they go by. Tons of flares up there. It's like a baseball game at 9 o'clock at night. Then a bullet went through my pants leg and hit my number 6 man. We had no choice but to keep going. I'm screaming at my men, dig those paddles. On one of those occasions when I was down like this, the machine gun burst went over where my head had been and riddled the engineer, riddled him, and he toppled over into the river. We finally hit the other side. It was too dark. We couldn't see the Germans anywhere. All we could do was fire into the darkness. Above us, they had 20 millimeter anti-aircraft guns up there. They pointed those down and started firing those at us. If it hits you, it explodes. And one of the guys got hit on top of the helm. Practically blew his head off. The orders came down to attack. Slowly but surely, we knocked out the machine guns. In the morning, when the daylight came, started entering buildings, we found out that the Germans were retreating in front of us. And the Germans started to throw mortars at us. That's all they could do. The tanks could not get at us. When you're moving from house to house, you got to be careful. When a mortar lands, that's the time to move to the next house. So I remember I was in this house and a mortar landed right on the street in front of us. And all of a sudden, I heard the worst scream I ever heard in my life. I looked up to the second floor to make sure there was nobody up there. And here was a guy, one of our guys, laying on the stairs. He was the one that got hit in the street. And he was hit awfully bad. Nothing I could do for him. Sat there on the stairs waiting for shelling to stop. I was laying there, his blood was dripping down the stairs to where I sat. I just made me feel so bad. But we eventually got to the end of the Vale, and we just turned the corner to go back into the main square. And Kenny Hill was my platoon sergeant. We just turned that corner, and a mortar landed right next to Kenny. And it didn't kill him, but he had so much lead in him. He probably had 30 to 40 pieces of shrapnel in him. He was hit so bad. We hadn't gone very far when we approached a roadblock, and there were Germans behind the roadblock firing at us. So we started firing back at them naturally. We finally caught them. Finally went far enough to flank them. They couldn't get away. These were kids 14, 15 years old. And they had old men out there, 60 and 65. It was a mess. Things started to flow pretty fast after that. We weren't scared to death in the morning that we were going to die that day. We didn't have that great fear of death that we had before. 8th or 9th of May, we were on the Czechoslovakian border. Now we were seeing people, displaced people, DPs we called them. These are people that work for the Germans in the factories, in the fields, prisoners, mixture of humanity. These people were not our responsibility, but they were with us. They were right beside us all the time. And we'd give them candy bars and K-rations and stuff that we could. I would throw hand grenades into the river, and then when they exploded, killed fish. Fish would float to the surface, and the DPs would run out into the river and pick up these fish so they could cook them for dinner. We were told that the Germans had accepted our terms about the 10th of May. It was the day the war was over. It was certainly a source of joy and relief, just like letting go of something, letting go of something that was a burden on you. And we built a big bonfire. First time we had a fire since the war started, since our war started. Big bonfire. And we started talking, and one of the subjects came up, what are you going to do when you get home? I'm going to party for a couple of months, and I'm going to go back to school, because the government's going to pay for the rest of my education, and meet some nice girl and get married. And just a very happy time, of course. Very happy time. Every day we lost people. There's no doubt about that. We lost 20 or 30 people a day. Again, why did I survive? And I thank God every single day to be alive. On Memorial Day, my mind will go back to the men that we lost. The price we paid to win that war is staggering. So those are the guys I think of, the ones who didn't come home, who never got the chance to be a good parent or a loving husband. It's vital that Americans not only appreciate the price that was paid for them to be free and living in this country, they've got to believe in the United States. We have to think about those people and honor them.